What is up, guys? Welcome back. We are on I think it's episode 18. Forgive me if I get that incorrect. It has been a little while, and I do want to acknowledge the silence. Obviously, some of you may have noticed, and I did announce it on my email list. And on here as well with a little status update that I would be stepping back for a little while. And I'm not going to go into detail about why I stepped back for a few months, other than what's relevant, because some of it's going to be relevant to what we're talking about today. I just, sometimes when you're in the middle of, obviously I was moving through something, right? And when you're in the middle of moving through something, stepping up to kind of narrate the process and talk through it to your audience interrupts the process. So it was very intentional. It was necessary for me to step back. I have a bunch of video topics that we're going to be talking about over the next few months. I'm super excited to be back. I'm super happy to be back. I missed you all. I'm going to be moving forward slightly differently, with slightly different tone and slightly different intention than what was before. Okay, so we're kind of closing one chapter and moving forward into another. So I kind of wanted to meet the moment. Let's talk about things that are happening right now. Obviously, disclosure of, all the horrible things that many of us who've been awake for a long time have known about are being disclosed now. And some people are only just learning about them now. So if you fall wherever you are on that spectrum, and if you're new here as well, welcome. I don't want to be talking about today like the who, what, the details, okay? Because, I want to be focusing on how we can really just really protect our nervous systems throughout this time, because looking after your nervous system with all the stuff that's being disclosed and revealed to us is central to the work. It's very much, if you're not, protecting your mental health, protecting your nervous system, protecting your wellness, you're not going to have capacity. You're going to run out of capacity. You're going to get burnt out and completely overstimulated, and not be able to tend to your own basic survival, and also how we need to be organizing moving forward, okay, and how we want to be responding to the things that are being disclosed at the moment. So as always, guys, I've got my notes right here, and I'm going to be going back and forth. But yeah, just one thing that's going to be change slightly, shifting tempo, because obviously during at the peak of the genocide, I've got some different incense today. We've got frankincense resin, which is amazing for top tip as well for protecting your nervous system. Okay, it's really good for calming anxiety, grounding yourself, activating the senses. It's really good for clearing out your respiratory tract as well, and air purification, and it helps with concentration as well. So I'm definitely needing it for this transmission. Slightly changing tempo, because obviously at the height of the genocide in Gaza, there was a need to respond very quickly to everything that was happening, because there was an urgency. Okay, we needed to kind of quickly get information out into the public consciousness so that people can quickly collectively organize, okay, because the assault that was happening on humanity and on children, we needed to respond to urgently. And many people, heeded that call. Whoever was able, whoever had capacity, and whoever was most emotionally affected kind of stepped up to the plate, got organized. We raised a lot of money for, essential life-saving, aid and supplies to help people. Obviously, the genocide is still continuing and ongoing, and we're also seeing multiple other genocides in Sudan, Congo, Tigray, many horrible things happening all over the world. But for me, if you've been with me for a long time, you'll know that I don't normally like to respond to things with that sense of urgency. That time called for it. And that's part of the reason why I needed to take the break, okay? Because that can be very, very overstimulating for your nervous system. And for me, I really needed to just calm down and take a break and not take on so much. So yeah, I'm really kind of coming back into that rhythm of like taking my time to respond to things. So obviously with the release of the Epstein files now, it's been, you know, more than a week, a couple of weeks, I guess. I'm not sure exactly. And yeah, I'm just trying not to get into that kind of knee-jerk response. Obviously, I have known about these kind of crimes against children for a really, really long time. Some of you might be new to this, and, you know, people's responses are different, okay? Like, I could, do you guys want to, you know, well, we're not live. Like, I'm wondering if you want me to talk about how I actually found out, how long ago, and what my response was. Because I think different people are going to be having different responses to what's happening at the moment right now based on where they're at in their source progression. So for those of us who found out about this many years ago, for me personally, I found out about specifically, you know, the child trafficking and satanic rituals and things like that. Maybe around, I think it was around 2015. It was kind of a gradual coming into this knowledge. You know, it was mainly through industry, you know, fashion industry associates. I think it was the first person that told me was a guy who I briefly dated in Bangkok, who I knew from the nightlife scene. So he was friends with, like, you know, a lot of the models and promoters who were out in the kind of Bangkok nightlife scene. And we kind of connected because we were both talking about the same things. We were both conspiracy theorists, right? We were both talking a lot about 9/11 and the CIA and all of this stuff. So we ended up connecting and, you know, getting to know each other and had a brief relationship. And he was the first person that told me about this. He was just like, yeah, all these politicians are corrupt and they're all in these secret societies. And I was like, yeah, like the Bilderberg group. And he's like, oh no, it's like there's so many of them. There's like, you know, the Masons and the Illuminati, and there's all these different sects, and, you know, there's like celebrities involved and Hollywood and royalty, and they're satanic, and they're cannibals and pedophiles, and they eat children. And I was just like, wow, you really gone deep down some weird ass internet rabbit holes, haven't you? And he was like, it's true. He didn't get angry at me. Like, I really was like, nah. And he was like, no, it was too much. Even though I was very kind of pretty awake, it was just too much for me. I was just like, that you lost me. And I've had other people telling me, you know, recently, as they're coming into this knowledge now, people who used to make fun of me years ago, who are now starting to ask me questions now that they're starting to slowly realize the truth. They're like, no, but when you start talking about this, you lose me. So one of the things that for those of you that have been aware of this stuff for longer, just try to titrate. You're going to get a lot of people who might have previously mocked you, or, you know, maligned you, blocked you, or called you crazy, now actually coming to you. You might not get any apologies. I haven't had any apologies yet, but they might slowly start opening up to you and expressing how they feel, how they're dealing with the information, and maybe asking you some questions. So try to titrate the information carefully and slowly based on, you know, what they can handle. This is, you know, like any way of teaching, imparting knowledge and wisdom, you don't overwhelm the student or the person, the initiate. You know, you just give them a little bit more until they've integrated it, assimilated it, and can hold it, and then they can absorb a higher worldview. And the way that the information is being disclosed to us right now is, I'm not the only person who thinks this, but I think is following a very deliberate, they're doing it very deliberately to overwhelm us. And I don't know. I've heard multiple different theories about it. I've heard some legal experts say that basically they're using reptile techniques. So if you try and research reptile theory or reptile, I think they call it reptile theory in the legal world. And if you search reptile theory on YouTube, you will come across stuff to do with shape-shifting reptilians and things like that, which is not what I'm talking about. Okay, that's we're not going there. We're not even going there for this video. Okay, we're not even talking about it right now. I'm not going to give my opinion on that right now. I'm actually quite, we can talk about David Icke, and I've talked about him in previous videos, but we can talk about him at another stage, okay? I'm a little bit skeptical of that narrative, okay? But let's just stick with what is in now becoming mainstream consensus, which is all human related stuff. No, we're not talking about any ETs, okay? Or even though Donald Trump has now just disclosed, he's calling for ET disclosure. Again, this is designed to overwhelm us, completely overstimulate us and overwhelm us. So it ends up, when you become so overwhelmed and so overstimulated, it can basically cause you to become completely numb, okay? Now, the numbness has a function, okay? Because many of us who've been actively engaged in what's happening in Gaza specifically, because essentially we were all forced to watch a live stream genocide. And I know not everybody was following it and was watching it, but a lot of us were. In the beginning, you're seeing all these horrible videos and they prompt you to take action, and that's very normal and that's very human, and that's how we're supposed to be responding. And then there's a point where you've seen so much of that you start to become numb to it, okay? That's also a very human trauma response, and the purpose of that, okay, we're not going to pathologize ourselves for this, okay? I've had as many of my clients have come to me and said, I've just got to a point where I've become completely numb and I can't feel like, I feel like a bad person, that I can't even respond to what's happening in so many horrible things in the world, and I'm just trying to tune it all out, and does this make me a bad person? I've had to get to that point several times, okay? And y'all know that I did a lot, okay? I was doing active fundraising and posting. I pretty much was doing full-time, not pretty much, I was doing full-time advocacy for Palestine for more than a year. I think it was ended up being like a year and a half just doing fundraising and raising awareness. And, I was able to financially afford to do that for various reasons. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that, because I know not everybody has the capacity. I did at that time, so I chose to do that. And even I got to the point, obviously I got to that point many times where I would become numb, because that's the point at which you've been overstimulated enough, and your job is not to respond to that right now, okay? You're done with the moral outrage. You've reacted as much as you possibly can right now. Your mind needs to turn, your body is trying to, and your nervous system is trying to get you to focus your attention on other things, like your own basic survival, like going to work, like making money, paying your bills, going to a supermarket, making food, taking care of your kids. Like those things obviously need to be tended to as well, okay? And then once you've done that and, taking care of your own mental and emotional wellness, then you have space and capacity to return to organizing and resisting and, all of those things. So it's important not to burn ourselves out, okay? Especially at this stage, okay? Obviously there's a time and place where we need to respond with urgency, and we need to be a little bit overstimulated and burn ourselves out, and then there's a time to heal and rest and recuperate, and then to re-enter with more sustained, more sustainable action, okay? And that's the phase that I'm entering into now. And many of you will be at that place as well. And not everybody. For some of you, with everything that's being released right now, it will be part of your templating to respond with total outrage and, being very adrenalized and completely responding to the moment with urgency and getting organized, holding people accountable, maybe, putting together bodies, independent bodies of people who are going to independently investigate people in your community or in your industry. The things that need to happen to deal with this problem that we're now being collectively shown, okay? Because I think we're at the point now where we can acknowledge that all the systems that have been set up, that we were told were set up to protect the rule of law and hold bad actors accountable, are infiltrated by the same bad actors, and that's why they have been so ineffective for such a long time. So we need entirely new systems, and we need to start building those systems. So some of you will be responding to that moment with urgency right now, and that's okay. That's okay? And yes, you might burn out, but if the moment is calling for that right now, then to trust it, and then you can rest later, okay? So that's, part of the reason why I stepped back, because I was also just resting, okay? Because the last 2 years was extremely intense on my nervous system, not just with the advocacy I was doing, but also what happened with my previous relationship, finding out that the person that I was laying up in bed with was cheating on me with every single person. So having those two things happening at the same time was just, the trauma was like, I didn't even give myself a chance to process it and move it out of the body. It took me, I had to really wait until it was safe for me to do that. I think part of the reason why they're just bombarding us with so much overwhelming information, and now with the ET disclosure and those, many people who've been researching this for a long time will know that those two things are heavily connected. Now, whether they're actually connected or whether it's a very elite, it's what very sophisticated, government psyop, that's connected, the trafficking networks to ETs, I'm actually not sure at this point, okay? Now, I know that, in previous videos I talked about how it's all connected. I'm actually questioning that now. And I think that we should question everything that we're being presented with, and really not just trust things willy-nilly, not just trust somebody else's opinion because they say that they're an expert, but really do our own investigative work. Because as we're now learning, many people are compromised and have been put there by the same systems that are actively causing harm. So it's basically causing compassion fatigue. Okay, so what was I saying? I jumped around from reptile theory. Yes. So reptile theory is not about shape-shifting reptilians. It's basically a legal technique that prosecutors will use to try and overwhelm a jury, bypassing the logical mind and basically directing their attack towards the reptilian part of the brain, the jury's brain. Okay, so basically what it does is it emotionally overwhelms the jury to the point where it starts to cause moral panic. Okay, and it's used in special case. There was a legal expert. Y'all should do your own research, okay, because I'm not a legal expert, so I hope I don't butcher it, but as I understand it, in cases, very, very sensitive cases, it's used a lot. Apparently, I've heard it's used a lot in kind of road traffic accidents, where prosecutors will be like, this person was driving dangerously, and if they're a threat to society, and so then people will be like morally panicking, and they'll give the defendant a much harsher punishment when those techniques are used, and maybe they can get bigger payouts for their clients and things like that using those techniques. So in cases where, and guys, correct me if I get anything wrong here, if there are any legal experts in the audience, because I'm not an expert in this, but I'm encouraging you all to research it. In cases which can be very emotionally sensitive, like involving very violent crimes against vulnerable members of the community, like children, women, elderly, that can be cause a lot of very intense emotions like anger and moral outrage, those techniques are not allowed. They have to be, the information has to be presented very carefully and contextualized, okay? So not like how when a lot of people are finding out about this stuff, And obviously with the fact that it's been hidden as well, they'll start making all these different connections. Oh, look, look at his striped building, and Ellen also has stripes on her thing, so she's one of them as well. And like, I'm not disputing, I think probably, Ellen was mentioned in the Epstein files multiple times, and I actually do believe that she was involved, but in a court of law, you can't just make those wild jumps. You have to really look at the evidence very carefully, and contextualize it, and then make proper, valid assumptions and not infer things that aren't true. So what they're doing with this very fast release of information is getting people to get into a state of moral panic where they start pointing fingers at everyone around them, basically. And definitely for those of us who went through this awakening process, a lot of us went through that, and it's terrifying. Okay, I am going to speak to this. Okay, so after I was told by this promoter friend, I was just like, I think he's believing some weird internet conspiracies, and I don't think that that's true. There's just obviously I can believe that these people are evil. Yeah, I mean, they bomb countries and bomb children and kill people, but eating babies is a little crazy. And then it was a friend from the fashion industry that told me later, it was maybe months later, another friend told me, and I was just like, I've heard this before, but I didn't believe it. And they were like, no, it's true, and you should research it. And I've been researching it for a really long time. And I also work as an undercover journalist, talking about this. So that, that person, obviously I wasn't just going to take that person's word for it. I have to obviously go and do my own research. So then I did start to go and do my own research. And the thing is, once you start to know things like that, you start to come into contact with other people who know those things as well. And, you'll mention something and then people will be like, oh, I know as well. And then people will start sharing information with each other. So a lot of information was just shared, forwarded between people. You wouldn't have seen it on social media. You would have had to already be part of a network of people that already knew about these things. And then people shared evidence amongst each other. So a lot of us have seen not like actual video evidence, but like victim testimonies, police interviews. I think one of them is the Hampstead cover-up. And, some people say that that's fake, and the mum may force the kids to make it up, and I don't know, okay? I just need a tissue. Yeah, so obviously once you find something like that out, you're just like, well, why isn't anyone doing anything about this? And then you become aware that, when you listen to the victim testimonies, people like Annika Lucas, Jeanette Archer, there are others, but I can't think off the top of my head. They'll talk about how some of their abusers were members of the police force, were judges, people that doctors were, and as we've seen, a lot of the people who were named, in this, in the Epstein files were judges, doctors, police, and a lot of celebrities. So once you become aware of that, you're like, wow, okay, so the system is completely rigged. It's terrifying, okay? And anybody who's now finding out about this, you're absolutely valid in being terrified and horrified. And if you're having nightmares, I went through that too, okay? I had horrible insomnia, and it kind of ruined my life in a lot of ways, because at that time I had just started to become pretty successful as a model. I'd just done Vogue. I'd got my first Vogue cover, and I was pretty in demand. I was booked and busy, And then you start becoming terrified. You become terrified of becoming really successful and having to associate with people like this, people who do these horrible things. And I wanted nothing to do with it. After that, I didn't want to be successful anymore. I didn't even really want to, I was questioning whether I even wanted to model anymore. Obviously, I still did continue, but I started to look for other ways, you know, to try and exit the industry. But then I started to question, well, what industry is there that isn't implicated in this? It's kind of seems like every industry, even, you know, those of us who are healers, or who are involved in kind of citizen journalism and who are doing this type of work, is also infiltrated by these people, as we have been slowly coming to realize. And, you know, I talked about on my email list, you know, sent an email out about that over the last few months, and we've slowly been realizing that some of our peers, you know, who are whistleblowers and speaking about this stuff, some of them are not just compromised, but were put in place by these people. So yeah, it is scary. And if you're scared, then I want to totally validate you. And I was discussing with this particular friend, you know, we were discussing how it had, you know, heavily affected our careers, because both of us, you know, they had been doing very, very well in their, I'm not going to say what job the person does or what the gender of the person does, but they'd been doing very, very well, and, you know, working for some very, very high profile clients, very in demand, booked and busy, same like me. And that's why we ended up working together at that time. And they were also drawn to me because of the posts that I was making, my spiritual posts that I was making as well, because they were going through the same process. And they said that it really, really affected their career, because they definitely, it doesn't, you know, talking about it, I don't know if that, that maybe does put off certain people, you know, but obviously people who might be complicit, you know, it would probably put them off booking you. But even the people who are not complicit, they might just think that you're a bit crazy. And I'm sure a lot of people did. But people still booked me, and, you know, I still was able to enjoy some success in my career even after that. You know, I still got, you know, I did cover for Harper's Bazaar a few years later, and I still continued to do quite okay, but I don't think anywhere near as well as I would have done if I hadn't found out this information, because I was so hungry for it, and I was such a hard worker. I was really ambitious, and I was just on it all the time. Like, you know, everyone who has worked with me, you know, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people who worked with me at that time will know how collaborative I was, how hardworking I was. I'm still like that, don't get me wrong, I'm still like that, but there's certain brands that I just will not shoot for now. Like, you know, last year, especially, you know, since the genocide last year, my agency will attest to this, that I probably said no to about half the jobs that kind of came into my inbox. I'm just like, sorry, I'm not working for that brand, I'm not working for that brand, I'm not working for that brand. And so it has really impacted my career, and I've had to find, you know, be creative and improvisational and find other ways of earning a living. And this other industry professional that I know expressed that they had experienced the same thing, and it impacted them financially quite negatively as well. And they also had to find other, you know, just random ways of making money. So, you know, for those of us who have been aware of this for a while, I definitely think that, you know, I for one definitely feel very vindicated with what's being revealed now, because we've been called crazy for so many years. And for the people that the victims of this type of these type of networks and this type of abuse, I cannot even imagine what y'all have been dealing with the last few years. You can't even talk about it because nobody believes you, or most people will just think that you're crazy or making it up. So for the victims of, you know, this type of very specific type of cult abuse, I'm very, very pleased that this information is now being disclosed openly, because, you know, you'll be believed. And there is probably going to now be a new generation of healers who are going to step up and be able to assist you with, you know, healing this trauma, because, you know, there are people out there who have been through this and who have survived these kind of horrible crimes. So, yeah. I think that they another reason why I think that they are bombarding us with so much of this disclosure, and obviously with, you know, what we've just been going through with what's been happening in Palestine, and now this, it's like we've not even had a chance to rest and integrate. And even with, you know, COVID, you know, we did have a little bit of a break, obviously, maybe a year or something, to try and get back to our lives. But I don't really think we had enough time to really process it. And then we were forced to witness a genocide, and now this. It's kind of, it's not just compassion fatigue. It's kind of programming us into a state of learned helplessness, because especially with Palestine, with what happened, I think their goal is to get us into a state of learned helplessness. So they did this study, and I saw Dr. Shiva. If you don't follow him, I think is he running for office? So I don't know. Dr. Shiva, I do kind of trust him. I don't feel like he's compromised. He's saying all the right things, but, you know, it's just, we've had our trust broken with so many of these people so many times that, you know, I'm just going to suspend judgment right now. But I do like him, and I do like what he's saying at the moment. So he just did a video talking about he talked about learned helplessness and the experiment that they did on dogs, where they were like electrocuting them. They had these dogs in a room and the floor was electrocuting. A very cruel experiment. And some dogs could jump over and escape, which they did. And there were other dogs that could press a button and somebody would come and help them. And then there were other dogs where they would press a button, and I forget exactly the details. Either it was intermittent, whether they sought help, or nobody came and helped. I think it was intermittent, okay? Where, you know, sometimes someone would come and help, but most of the time they didn't come and help. And so what happened was, eventually the dogs just stopped trying. They stopped pressing the button because they were like, oh, nobody comes. And maybe somebody would come eventually. If they kept on pressing it, they would eventually come. But they just became programmed into learned helplessness, that they just learned that nobody was coming, so they might as well not even try. And his theory is that this is what they're doing to us with, you know, just, it's kind of like pushing the idea of hypernormalization. So, you know, it's just normal now that thugs will drive around the streets and kidnap indigenous people and put them in internment camps, like what's happening in the US right now. It's just normal that kids get blown up live on TV. And that's one of the things that my ex-boyfriend said to me when, you know, shortly before we broke up. He totally normalized it. I was just like, how can you be responding like this? And he was just like, when are the US government not killing brown people? And I was just like, valid, but no. No, we're not normalizing this. Genocide is not normal. It's not what humans have already done. It's just human nature. Okay, that's hypernormalization. It's a mental disorder, and we need to fight it. Okay, we need to fight back against it. We need to say, this isn't normal. This isn't just human nature. We don't go around doing stuff like that. So just because those people are going around doing stuff like that, just because people throughout history have gone around doing stuff like that, does not mean that that's our natural way of being. Okay, there are ways to fix the problems that we're facing, and normalizing them ain't it. Okay, so yeah, like they've been normalizing not just genocide, but also Satanism and pedophilia. So, you know, Satanism, that's kind of, we could do a whole video just talking about the normalization of Satanism. But, you know, a lot of people critique capitalism. That's the hypernormalization of Satanism, individualism. If you study Satanism and the 4 pillars of Satanism, you'll know that individualism is one of the pillars. Being very self-oriented rather than others-oriented. I'm not saying that we should be completely others-oriented either, as that was something that was really weaponized against us during the medical tyranny that we went through in 2020. But, extreme individualism is not the way either, okay? That's what we refer to as narcissism or reptilian masculine, left brain dominance. Patriarchy is another word for it. It's a very imbalanced way of being, and they've been normalizing it for many years, and a lot through some of these new age teachings as well, okay? A lot of new age teachings are very satanic. They are watered down from occult teachings like Kabbalah, which not many people are allowed to initiate into, but a lot of people in Hollywood and politics and a lot of these very wealthy elites, very powerful elites, are initiated into Kabbalah, and its ideology is essentially satanic. If you kind of look into what's been disclosed to the public about it, you will realize that. And they've been normalizing pedophilia for many, many years. I've kind of talked about that and tracked some of that in my previous videos that I filmed in Mexico, where I was talking about Balenciaga, the Balenciaga Gate, and the Kinsey reports, and how Hugh Hefner was inspired by the Kinsey reports to start Playboy. And Hugh Hefner, look, Epstein is not the only person running these honeypot blackmail operations. He's one of many. Hugh Hefner was one. Okay, Hugh Hefner also had cameras in every room in the Playboy mansion and had blackmail material. He was a deep state asset. Jimmy Savile, he was our UK's version of Epstein. He was a procurer for the royal family. I don't know if he was necessarily a MI5 asset or like did blackmail. That hasn't been disclosed or released, but I wouldn't doubt it. Like, probably, why wouldn't you if you're that fucking evil? Going back even further, Diana Dawes. Look up Diana Dawes, guys. She was also a deep state asset, okay, and she would host these huge Hollywood parties with young hopefuls, and she would film everything, okay, and there were all kinds of debauchery and hedonism that would happen at her parties, and she would use it as blackmail. Not her by herself, she was a deep state asset, okay, so she was working for the club. Okay, so I know it seems like the world is ending right now. But actually I want to completely reframe this, okay? Just because the darkness and the evil that we've been living with for so long is now finally coming to the light, does not mean that the world is ending, okay? Quite the opposite, in fact. If anything, we have an opportunity for a new beginning, and to really look at what we've been living under for, the last few decades, or even possibly even centuries, who knows, I think a lot of these cults go back to ancient Babylonian times. So we've probably been living under this kind of darkness since then. So now we have an opportunity to really decide how we want to move forward. If anything, I've been feeling more hopeful than ever before. And yes, that is partly because, I've been talking about this for many years, and finally I'm feeling vindicated. And I'm sure many of you who've known about this for many years are also starting to feel that way. We have a choice point to help guide others in the right direction now. Many of us have been divesting from these harmful systems for a really, really long time. We've realized what celebrity culture is, that a lot of these celebrities are involved, that they're basically essentially getting us to participate in a form of idol worship, because many of them are actually channeling some of these ancient deities that are very nefarious, that don't serve the Most High, that are not connected to the law of one, and have, not that I'm saying, okay, look, I don't want to lose you guys, I do want to keep this pretty grounded, but I am a field worker, okay, and I am initiated into occult knowledge. I am a clairvoyant, and so I do see certain things in the field, and I understand how things work, okay. I'm not saying that they're not responsible for the crimes that they're perpetuating against humanity, but they are working with some very nefarious, high-level entities that have influence over them to commit some of these heinous crimes, and that's why they do them. That's why they perform some of these satanic rituals, okay, because it's to feed their, basically the demons that they're working with that give them power and wealth, okay. So by feeding them your attention, you are participating in the black magic occult spells that they are basically waging against you. And so you give them your money, you're turning them into billionaires, and they all got very, very wealthy off your attention, and they're harming children. So you need to divest from all celebrity culture. Like I barely ever watch movies. The only time I will ever watch a movie or like a Netflix show is if somebody has recommended it as having some kind of symbolism, or if it's part of the work that I'm doing for research purposes, or sometimes occasionally if I'm like with family and, you know, people want to watch a movie as part of like a family bonding experience, then I will. I'm not super strict or religious about it, but I don't sit there and like watch Netflix by myself, or like watch you know, like Hollywood movies. I don't buy popular music. Most of the music that I listen to is by independent artists. Yeah, I don't buy celebrity fragrances. I don't buy anything by Kim Kardashian. I don't pay any attention to stuff that Taylor Swift is doing. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying either way whether these people are involved or not. Y'all will find out. I don't know were they mentioned. I actually haven't, like, I'll be, you know, full disclosure, I haven't looked at the files myself in detail, because my nervous system cannot handle it right now. But I have listened to a lot of people kind of disseminating the files and talking about some of the people that were mentioned in them and what the context was. But yeah, a lot of these, you know, huge celebrities, I just assume are involved. I know maybe I've said that we shouldn't just be pointing fingers at innocent people, and that's true, but you know, I'm not saying that we necessarily like prosecute them or, you know, have a witch hunt. I'm just saying stop buying what they're selling, because are they actually helping humanity? No. So yeah, I kind of have been pulling back my attention from all aspects of celebrity culture for many years, okay? And a lot of it is programming. It's negative programming. When you look at the kind of stuff that they put in a lot of the mainstream music, also to the frequencies that they use are quite harmful for your system, just going in a more kind of esoteric lens. You know, your system responds very well to certain frequencies. Certain frequencies will actually heal different parts of your body, and some of the frequencies that are put out by the mainstream music industry will activate parts of your body that produce negative outcomes and negative effects. So they'll encourage you to kind of behave in hypersexual ways and promote hookup culture and things that are very harmful to you and your life and your future. So I've avoided that negative programming for a really long time. I encourage other people to do the same. Okay, so what I'm really seeing happening right now is a kind of bifurcation, a splitting of timelines. And I've spoken about this a lot. In previous videos. I don't want to, you know, overly spiritualize it and be like, oh, look, there's two earths that are splitting, and, you know, it's going to be like a dimensional bandwidth and we won't be able to talk to people in 5D. And no, it's much more grounded than that, okay? We have a choice point, okay? We can choose, and they have a different vibrational frequency to them, and could they result in a dimensional split? I don't know, maybe, but I want to keep this kind of grounded for the time being. We have a choice point. We can choose to be passive observers to everything that's unfolding and see, oh, what's going to happen? What's coming next? Oh, is somebody going to do something about this? Are there going to be arrests? Why aren't there arrests? Or we can be co-creators, and we can decide how things go. Okay, we literally are co-creators in this collective hologram, collective dream that we are all living in. And that, you know, for those of you who have initiated into certain occult knowledge, you'll know that this is the truth of it. Okay, that you get to decide, you get to control reality. I'm not saying that you get to control everything that happens to you, okay, but I'm saying that we do have control over the outcome, and it's in how we co-create. Okay, so getting organized with other people, building community. I'm spending a lot more time offline these days. I'm sure you've noticed. I will be obviously back to programs, you know, scheduled programming, but I am focusing much more on my offline life, and you know, connecting with people in my local community, building those networks, okay, of people, like-minded people, people who care, people who want to do something, and people who are pulling back from the system and who are creating alternative ways of being, okay. And yes, there will be justice and accountability, and there are going to be people, if you feel like that's your mission template, then you do that. You organize with people who are also about that, and you ask others in your community for support in doing that, crowdfunding and things like that, to actually make sure that these bad actors are held to account. And we set up new systems that way. And there'll be other people who have a different role to play, you know, focusing on how, you know, food systems and healing technologies, and like, you know, how we support our communities going forward. Everybody's needed. Like, it's literally time. It's time for you to like step up and really figure out like how you are going to get involved in creating this new, better world that we are all so desperate to see. Okay, and to do that, you have to get involved. We dictate culture, okay? We decide, especially now with social media and how much it's democratized things. We're no longer having to deal with so many gatekeepers like we did before. Okay, we can literally, you know, we can create our own record companies, we can create our own production companies, we can create our own, you know, films and music videos, and, you know, the music that we, like, you know, Dom's been creating his own music. I don't know if you guys have been following that, but I cannot even keep up with how many new songs that he's released, and he's putting, you know, his heart and his message, and his activism and his truth into the lyrics. So, you know, if you want conscious music, a lot of it is electronic, with dubstep and things like that. If you like those kind of genres, then go follow him on Instagram. I'll put his Instagram in the description, and you can check out what he's been working on. But so many of you are going to be doing things like that, you know, making music, making art, making films. Okay, I know I've had a lot of people in the acting, entertainment kind of film side of things who are clients of mine, who have also been aware of this stuff for a really long time, and it's affected you, and it's affected your careers and stuff, and that's a really hard thing. And I know, because I've been through that with my career as well as a model, and it was actually one of the reasons why, you know, my agency was pushing me for acting, and for Bollywood specifically, because I was, you know, heavily working in Asia when I found out. And then I found out about this stuff, and you know, it was an open secret that Bollywood is all casting couch culture. Not necessarily like every single film, like you know, it was, once you become known, it can be a little bit easier, but it was kind of an open secret that the girls that were getting, you know, a lot of roles were participating in casting couch culture. Obviously, I don't want to say that about everybody categorically, because I don't know, but we knew that was happening with a lot of people. You know, I was offered a role at one point, that I was supposed to audition for a role, and I was told that I was pretty much going to get it. And then I didn't hear anything. I can't remember, did I actually end up doing the audition or not? Anyway, I didn't hear anything. And then later on, I ended up meeting the actor that I was supposed to act alongside, he just came to the model apartment. He was friends with the guys I was living with, and he was like, yeah, I'm working on a new movie. And then he explained the movie, and he was like, yeah, my name's I'm an actor. And I was like, oh, is that movie? I was just like, I was nearly cast for the role of, and he was like, oh, that was you. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, that's my fault that you didn't get that. And I was like, why, what do you mean? He goes, oh, I gave it to my friend. And I was just like, oh, is that how it is? Like, you don't just choose the best person. He's like, nah, man, Bollywood's about relationships. And he's just like, let's go for dinner next week, and I'll, give you some tips and, help you get into the industry. And then we went for dinner. We went for a dinner in his hotel room. And he pretty much spent the whole night just trying to hit on me. Like, he didn't force himself on me, but it was very clear like what his intention was, and I told him I wasn't interested, and then I never got any roles. So I guess that's just how it goes. But I'm not saying that the whole industry is like that. Obviously I'm sure people get roles for being good at acting, but that's one way into the industry, and it wasn't one that I was willing to take. And not just that, but like, for me, it's just not, acting is not super compatible with my divine union. I don't want to be like acting alongside, pretending to be somebody's romantic love interest. I have my own love interest, and I don't want to pretend to be anyone else's. So for me, it's not compatible. I'm not telling anybody else how they should live their lives. Obviously you have to decide what's right for you, and with your soulmate, you guys are obviously going to have the same templating of what is acceptable in your union. Okay, so I think it's important also to not pathologize people for their nervous system responses to this, because we're going to see a whole range. Okay, we're going to see people emotionally crashing out. We're going to see people getting angry and frustrated, and just basically crashing out at other people for not responding in the way that they are. I've seen a couple of videos of, I think there was some guy who was going around an airport screaming, going, the Epstein files have just been released, and all of you are acting like this is normal. And I felt that, like, even though I'm walking around like everything is normal, it's not. When I found out about, can you imagine finding out about this, for those of us that found out 10 years ago, and not only are we having to deal with everybody just acting like everything is normal, when we try and tell people about it, they mock us and deny it. Okay, like, just think how for those of you that were following what was happening in Palestine, if you're telling people what's happening in Palestine and they mock it and tell you that you're crazy and that it's made up, like, you'd be like, you're a fucking sicko. Like, how dare you deny a genocide? Like, there's so much evidence. Like, are you a Zionist? Do you support genocide? We were having those kind of mental leaps, right? So imagine, for those of us that knew about this for so many years and were trying to tell people, and we were mocked and told that we're crazy and all this other stuff, right? And if somebody was like supporting some celebrity that we knew was compromised and we knew was involved in this type of stuff, you're crazy, I'm going to support them. And you're having to, these people are your friends and your family. Okay, it's been hard. Okay, it's been really hard for a lot of us, and many of us have had to have our own little private crash outs. Okay, I had insomnia for years, and nightmares for years, trying to process and metabolize this information. So a lot of people are going to be going through that now. So for those of us who've been through it, like, yes, it can be tempting to be like, we told you so. I'm trying not to be like that. I did say to some family members, I was just like, why did it take for you guys to be told by the mainstream media, i.e. the same people that are complicit in these kind of crimes, to tell you that this was happening? We told you about it years ago. Like, I told you about it. I found out about it because of my friends in the fashion industry, which now adds a lot of credibility. Back then it didn't, because no one fucking listened to models. But now, obviously, the links between Epstein and model agencies is becoming more apparent. The fact that I found out about it from people in the industry adds more credibility. But yeah, let's try not to pathologize people for their different reactions that they're having right now. Obviously, everybody's going to have slightly different reactions. Some of us are going to be a little bit angry because of how we've been treated for the last few years. And just try and hold space. If you're just finding out about it now, and some of your people have known about it for years and they're angry with you, try and understand where they're coming from with that, and vice versa, okay? For people who thought you were crazy for a long time and now are realizing it and they're crashing out, try and be there for them as well, okay? Because we're going to need each other to get through this. Obviously, the people who don't care because they don't care that children are being harmed, because they probably harm children themselves or want to, or they're complicit, or they benefit from these systems, obviously pathologize them all you want, okay? They're fucking evil, and I'm not super kumbaya about this stuff, okay? I obviously know that there's evil people on this planet, and that's what we need to try and purge out, okay? I'm not saying what we should do with those people. I think they need some kind of intervention, okay? Yeah, that's obviously a deep question that we should also be asking ourselves. Like, how do we hold these people accountable? Like, what do you do with somebody who commits these kinds of crimes? Is there any coming back from it? I don't know. Like, I'm probably not the person to ask about this, because for me, you fuck with children, I'm very like, I get very Ishtar about this type of stuff, okay? I'm very like, you know, I will go to war, like, to defend the innocent and to defend the sacred. Obviously, I would never hurt anyone who's innocent, and, you know, but like, I would not draw the line at ending somebody who hurt children. So that's me. Like, y'all can feel differently about that. But yeah, like, just like how we saw people unpacking their own Zionism, and even, you know, for example, they, like with the IDF, or IOF, there's this organization called Breaking the Silence, where former IOF soldiers will basically break their silence and talk about the things that they did, the horrible things that they did while serving for the Israeli occupation forces. Might we get people, you know, talking about how they deprogram themselves? You might, okay? We've already had people like Teal Swan, for example. And even Annika Lucas has said that she was forced to do things. So when you research this stuff, if you are going to, and if you're not able to look into it, that I totally respect that, okay? You have to go into it when you have the space to metabolize it. And it's so, so important when you are researching this stuff, if you're diving into this stuff, that you take breaks. You got to take some long breaks sometimes, okay? I researched this stuff over years, okay? I would dive into the research. I'd spend a couple of days or maybe even a couple of weeks sometimes obsessively researching, mostly listening to victim testimonies. People like, Jeanette Archer, a lot of the people that John Wedger interviewed. Now, I know that some people have said that they think that John Wedger is compromised, that he's a Mason. I don't know. He's interviewed a lot of victims. Could some of the victims be fake? Yeah, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible that some of the victims could be fake. And they could be naming people that aren't involved, okay? We also have to be aware that this could be such a very sophisticated psyop, because, you know, we need to ask, why are we being allowed to know this right now? Because they've infiltrated so many of our movements with their people. Could they just... It's entirely possible, and maybe even likely, that they are just keeping control of the narrative, and that the people that they're naming might not even be the people. I mean, obviously, I know that the QAnon people are saying that, you know, Trump being named is, you know, their attempt to smirch him when actually he's the one saving the children. And I personally don't believe that. I think he's as guilty as any of them. But I think it's entirely possible that whoever is disclosing this information is naming, you know, maybe people that were involved, but not the biggest players. And that maybe they're going to try, this is the theory, right? That they basically setting up the stage to bring in the Antichrist. who's going to come in like this savior, and we're going to save the children, and we're going to get rid of. And a lot of people have theorized that this is Donald Trump. I've spoken about that a lot in previous videos, that he is the Antichrist, the Jewish Moshiach, or the Islamic Dajjal. Other people can have different theories about it, that he's going to save everybody and drain the swamp and get rid of these people. And, the QAnon people have been saying this for years, that they've been having tribunals for years in the background, and the people, the Queen was gone ages ago, and Hillary Clinton is just a clone, and they're just all clones, and they've actually been in Guantanamo for years. And I don't know. I don't think so. I don't really trust any of the QAnon people, because they're Zionists. They're Zionists. So, and Trump is a Zionist, so I don't trust Zionists. But I forgot what I was going to say. Where was I going? Can't remember what I was going to say. Yes, what they're engaging in is a revelation of the method. So they're revealing what they've been doing out in the open. So that means if we don't, now that the information is freely available and freely openly released, even if it's not released so openly, as they've been doing with many other things, right? If we don't organize to stop it, then we're basically consenting to having these things done to us, done to our children. So it's really important. Obviously, that's their belief. We don't have to agree with that, but it is important that we organise to stop them, because they are going to continue if we don't stop them. So, what I'm basically trying to say is it's entirely possible that the people disclosing the information are also involved, but they're gatekeeping certain names. Obviously, they've redacted so many names. So back to my earlier point, make sure that you are taking long breaks, okay? I do jump around a lot. I'm so sorry, guys. My brain kind of works like this, but obviously you can only talk in a linear way, right? So you can spend days or weeks diving into the research. I would just stay up all night researching it, and gave myself really bad insomnia. And then you have to take breaks. And I would say take breaks that are at least as long as you've been researching. So if you've been researching for like 5 days or 2 days, make sure that you take a break that's at least 2 days, if not 4 or 6 days, okay? Because otherwise it gives you a very, very negative worldview, and it will really, really fuck with your mental health. And you can get burnt out as well, which has actual physical symptoms that will negatively affect your life and your health and your ability to earn a living and survive in this world. So it's really, really important, okay? I'm going to be sharing some more healing content that's going to help us navigate these times, okay? Ways that we can ground, ways that we can take care of the body, ways that we can process trauma through the body, okay? And yes, I will be commenting on things happening politically as well, but I want to be focusing more on the healing stuff now, okay? Because that's my skill set, and that's where I want to be keeping my focus. And that's where I feel like I can be most of service. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that transmission. I have availability for sessions. I did drop the price on those slightly while I had some clients finishing up their sessions and had a window of availability. So while I still have some availability, those sessions are slightly reduced. You can book those via my website in the description below. And make sure you're signed up for my email list, because I'll be bringing some offerings over the next few months to you guys. And the email list is the first place where I share those. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. I super appreciate your attention if you stayed with me all the way to the end. And I will see you in the next video. Peace out. One love, guys.